Hi guys, welcome chapter 10, section 2, probability. Now this section is very exciting because we're actually getting into the meat of the chapter, the probability. Last section, we kind of just did definitions, a couple examples, some vocab words. Right? But this section, we're actually understanding what probability is. So what is probability? Well, probability is a number that measures the likelihood that an event will occur. That's probably the most important part. Probability is the likelihood that an event will occur. Now, probabilities can be measured from 0 to 1. We normally write probability as either a fraction, a decimal, or a percent. So let's look at different probabilities that can happen. We're going to draw a number line, and different probabilities that could happen are 0, 0.25, 0.5, 0.75, and 1. You could also have any number in between, but notice you cannot have any number under 0 or any number above 1. And the reason is because if we were to convert these into percents, 0 as a percent is 0%. You cannot have anything under 0%. If probability is the likelihood that an event will occur, you cannot have something under 0% likely. Like, oh, what's the percent of flipping tails? Oh, that's a negative 10%. That's not possible. The lowest would be flipping, or the lowest would be 0%. But we all know flipping tails is 50%, right? Also, above 1. If we were to change 1 into a percent, you would multiply by 100, which is 100%. You cannot have anything above 100%. You cannot say there's a 110% chance this will happen. No. If you have a 100% chance, that means it will happen no matter what. You cannot have above a 100% chance, right? So first, let's look at the 0. 0 means it's impossible. You can't, if something is 0% likely to happen, it's not going to happen. That's impossible. That cannot happen. There's no chance. Think of the number 0 as the word no. 0% chance means no, not going to happen. Next, 0.25. If we were to make that as a percent, it would be 25%. If there's a 25% chance, it's not very likely, right? It's not even half. You don't have half a chance, right? You have 1/4. So we say unlikely. It's not very likely, unlikely. Next, 0.5 is a 50% chance, right? So if you have a 50% chance, it might happen, it might not happen, right? So 0.5, we say equally likely to happen or not happen. It could happen, but it's just as likely that it could not happen. It's a tie. 0.75 is a 75% chance, right? If you have a 75% chance of something happening, pretty good chance, right? So notice 0.25 was unlikely, so 0.75 is likely, right? And then when we get to 1 is a 100% chance. So instead of saying it will happen, it has to happen, we say it is certain. So you can have any range from impossible to certain, anything in between. Now let me put the percents down so that you guys can get everything. So 0 is 0%, 0.25, 25%. Remember, when going from a decimal to a percent, you always multiply by 100. So notice the decimal place just moved to the right twice. All right, if you didn't get this down, you can pause the video, but I'm going to go on to our example problem. We only have one example problem today, so it's very exciting. Oh, just kidding, we're not quite there yet. The probability of an event is the ratio of the number of favorable outcomes to the number of possible outcomes. We need to first understand how we use probability, right? I showed you what probability was, but I didn't show you how to use it. You don't understand probability if you don't know how to use it. You need to apply the language of probability, right? So probability of an event or an experiment is the ratio of the number of favorable outcomes to the number of possible outcomes. So remember, a ratio, the most common way we write a ratio is through a fraction. So that means we're going to have a numerator and a denominator. So here, oh, this one, P parentheses event means the probability of an event. Remember, when two numbers are next to each other with no sign in between, that means multiplication, right? The word we use for multiplication is of, right? I know that's kind of weird, but just look at this notation. This means probability of an event. Now we have a numerator and a denominator here, right? So in the definition, it says a ratio of the number of favorable outcomes to the number of possible outcomes. That means the number of favorable outcomes is on top and the number of possible outcomes is on the bottom. Notice here that there's always more possible outcomes. For example, if we're talking about the event of rolling a die and getting even or odds, the possible outcomes is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But the favorable outcomes, if it's an even, it's only 2, 4, 6. If it's odd, it's only 1, 3, 5. So there's always more possible outcomes than favorable outcomes, which means your probability will never be more than 1 because the numerator is always smaller than the denominator. So make sure you understand that numerator is always smaller than the denominator for probability. That has to be the case. So remember this, guys. Probability is favorable outcomes over possible outcomes. And I'm just going to write favorable over possible. That's a bit of an easier way to remember. Okay, so let's actually do an example now. So we roll a number cube, and we want to know the probability of rolling an odd number. So what is the probability of rolling an odd number? Well, we're going to need a couple different things. First, let's look at all the possible outcomes. So possible. What are all the possible outcomes? Well, if we roll a number cube, we did this last section, we can get a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5, or a 6, right? We can get any of those. But now we want to know the favorable outcomes. So remember, favorable outcomes, those are just the outcomes that we want. So we're talking about odd numbers, right? So we're talking about odd numbers here. So we only want the odd numbers out of these possible. So let's pick all the odd numbers from the list of possible outcomes. So we're talking about odd, I see a 1, a 3, and a 5. So I'm going to put 1, 3, and 5. So we found all the possible outcomes. We found all the favorable outcomes. Now we just need to find the probability. So remember, probability of an event equals favorable over possible. Fav over possible, right? Favorite over possible. Now, favorable. It's not the numbers 1, 3, and 5. It's how many, right? If you go to the last slide, it says number of favorable outcomes. So how many favorable outcomes do we have? Well, we had 1, 3, 5. That means we have 3 favorable outcomes. Now, how many possible outcomes are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? We have 6 possible outcomes. So that means the probability of rolling an odd number is 3 out of 6. Or 1/2, right? You always simplify. Always simplify. Always simplify. It's kind of hard to write on here. Always simplify when possible. Here, I could do a little bit better on that. There you go. Always simplify when possible. Hey, so 1/2. Now, I didn't ask you this on this question. However, how likely is this event to occur? If you have a 1/2 chance, what percent is that? Well, that's a 50%, which means it is equally likely. You will have some of those on your homework tonight. And that's how you do probability. Always favorable outcomes over possible outcomes. First, identify how many possible outcomes there are. On your homework, you're going to have one that has a bunch of t-shirts. Find out how many t-shirts there are, and then find out how many specific t-shirts that you want. How many red ones do you want? How many blue ones do you want? And make that fraction. Favorable outcomes over the possible outcomes. Okay, let's go to your homework. So your homework, remember, is due Friday, April 24th by midnight. You could turn it in before that. Big Ideas 10.2, pages 410 through 411. Just go on the Big Ideas website, submit it like you normally do, right? You have unlimited check answers. I'm not asking you to show your work or anything. Just do the homework. If you don't have access to big ideas, remember, you go to the textbook 410 through 411, do problems 4 through 15, 23 through 27. Take a picture of it, email it to me, and you guys are done. Right? Remember, it's due Friday. All right, this is your second lesson of the week. So remember, you have 3 lessons to do this week. You have chapter 10 intro, you have chapter 10.1, and you have chapter 10.2. I think it's 40 questions total. So you have 1 week to do these 40 questions. All right, challengers, good luck, and I will see you guys during office hours. You guys have a great rest of your day. All right? Bye.